Thank you guys so much. We're super excited to have you here for our third and hopefully not final forever Workplace for Breakfast webinar. My name is Brittany and I will be your moderator again for today. We developed this webinar series for you all really to just dive into the implications that the coronavirus is having on the workplace. So we've already talked about elements of a work from home program, and we've talked about the return to work. And today we're specifically going to be reimagining the workplace post COVID-19. So this series is really kind of diving into the today, the tomorrow, and the future of the workplace. Our webinar will be hosted again by our Strategic Workplace Services Division, Jenny Durbin and Meagan Boen. And we're super, super excited. So before we dive into our presentation today, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items with you all. Please take a moment. If you're new to Blue Jeans, look in your upper right-hand corner. You'll see a few icons there. One of those icons says chat. If you click on the chat feature, you can drop in any messages to everyone will be able to see it. So drop anything in there. Enter any questions that you have throughout this webinar. We really, really love questions. It makes this webinar so much more interactive. So please drop them in there. We'll be pausing about halfway through the webinar to answer some questions. And then again, at the very end, we'll be asking if for some reason anybody's having technical issues, you're welcome to send me a direct message and I will help you out as quickly as possible. And then today's presentation will be held by Meagan Boen and Jenny Durbin. Again, they're leaders of our Strategic Workplace Services Division. They're amazing. They're a force to be reckoned with. We're so excited that they're here speaking and sharing their knowledge with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and just pass the floor over to them. Thank you all so much. And again, please drop in any questions that you have in the chat feature. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. My name is Jenny, for those of you who I have not met or we have not interacted yet on this virtual platform. And I'm so excited to move into the future of the workplace. It's a fascinating discussion, and we're really pleased that you could all join us today. So very quickly, we're just going to recap where our last two webinars have been and kind of taking us into today's discussion. And we really frame this around the journey and learning as we go. We are not experts in COVID-19 or this rapid and unprecedented event of moving the entire workforce into the home environment. So everything that we've talked about so far and the things especially that we're moving into today is around learning as we go and using knowledge and the experience and the shared wisdom and expertise of colleagues, peers, and industry experts to guide our path forward. So our first webinar, we talked about the now, what's immediately needed to just re-enter the workplace and to do so quickly, safely, efficiently, and really augmenting our current workplace for this unprecedented return to work plan. And then in the second webinar, we started to talk about what a more comprehensive work from home program should actually look like and how you take advantage of the experience right now while it's fresh, and tools and areas to explore that will lead you through a internal discussion within your organization to determine whether or not a work from home program is a viable part of your workplace strategy, or if it's potentially just part of a business continuity plan. I think we know, and we really emphasized in webinar 2 that we've opened the genie and people are working from home and they're productive and they're going to expect an answer to that question. And then now we're going to move into how you take what you've learned from the work from home exploratory conversation and perhaps start to pilot a new approach. Look at your workplace as a maybe 50% inhabited environment, and how is that leading you towards long-term real estate decisions. And so just really wanted to set the frame and the tone for today that we recognize where organizations are today. We are still building our return to work plans, and we know that that's still the environment we're going to walk back into. but also let's talk about the bright future and the purpose of our future workplace and kind of reimagining what that can look like. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. If you could just advance the slide one for me. I'm going to turn it over to Meagan, who is going to talk a bit about what your workplace and what we've been experiencing with our clients over the last few weeks.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, everyone. So good to see you again if you're joining us for the second or third time. And for those of you that are new, welcome. I'm excited to have you here. So we wanted to obviously talk about the future of the workplace in this webinar today, but I wanted to just touch on some of the things that we've talked about in earlier discussions and address our immediate future, if you will. So right now there's a lot of great work going on with an effort to bring us back into the office. And what you're seeing here are some of the diagrams that we've been doing to help our clients come back, and just things that we're thinking about as far as what are the risk levels throughout our office floor plate, seating proximity diagrams that are helping us understand the maximum head count we can bring in at this time to help us identify how many phases of reentry. And then also how we're circulating through the environment, creating these one-way boulevards and areas for sanitizers, and just different units that can help us stay clean, healthy, and safe as we enter back into the workplace. We've been seeing a lot of screens and signage and wall-mounted items to incorporate and sort of apply to that workplace. And this is our now, if you will, in our very near future. And our goal and our part of our discussion today is how can these added elements that were never intended in our original design become more integrated in our environments as we learn from this virus and as we move into the future of the built form. So that's something that is just really top of mind, and we want to kind of contrast the today with what our future will be later on in this webinar. With that, I'll turn that over to Jenny, because I think that what we're experiencing and as we're coming back into the workplace, we're all thinking about how this impacts our real estate portfolio moving forward.
Sure. So everyone is wondering, what is the long-term impact and how much space do I really need? Our modern workplace over the last 30 years has been driven by density and moving towards a leaner footprint, more people per area, more people per space. Square footage has dropped from 500 and 600 square feet per person down to somewhere between 150 in the tech environment to 235, 250 for other life science and real estate, or life science and R&D environments. The shared space is 56 square feet per person. So when you think about those densities and now what we're doing to our workplace, we're kind of swinging that pendulum back. So everyone is starting to ask how long or how much space is really necessary. And also right now, our buildings are standing empty, 90% empty, maybe 100% empty. Organizations can only sustain that for so long before having to make decisions around what to do with their physical footprint. So we know that by this pendulum swinging back, it is going to have an impact on your physical footprint. And also now, in light of having evidence to support the fact that organizations can be productive in working from home, that we will start to see home office strategies figure into the real estate equation. So previously, where we were driven by maybe headcount or an expansion or a technical requirement or just organic growth, and it was driven around on-site amenities and on-site services and on-site things that you need to have to accommodate staff together, 45, 50, 60 hours a week. Now I think we're going to start to see how a home office figures into an overall strategy, and that will be seeded in throughout the conversation today. We do know, no matter what, that we need to measure and look at these core elements of measuring what matters and the things that are run true through the organization, no matter what we're stepping into. For many years, for always, organizations have been asking the question, how much space do I need? And what does my space look like? What is the most optimal design for my workplace? Can I benchmark against others? Well, all of those things are still true, even while we're at new elements going forward. So we just want to emphasize that we are going to measure what matters, and we do want to look at the unique elements of the organization that make that whole for you, that will help you define your future, whatever that means. So as we talked about in webinar 2 with the work from home program concepts, your culture, your goals, your industry, the employee demographics are all going to play into the unique solution for you. And while we know that right now, actually nobody is in the workplace, we do want to talk a little bit about how you tap into looking at the performance of your workplace to reimagine the future workplace environment. So let's fast forward a little bit and say maybe 3-4 months from now, fingers crossed, that we will have a balance of people back in the workplace, and you will have some sense of what a new normal might look like. And if that's the case, then what can you do with the information at hand to help start to formulate ideas and concepts around what your future workplace should look like? So Meagan, if you are working with a client and they're asking, I need to refigure my workstations, my environment, I'm looking at a change in our program, what steps or what would you advise them to do to take a look at their physical workplace?
That's a great question, Jenny. And in this topic of the future, I think that is a question that a lot of organizations will start to ask themselves. What you see before you is just a 2D floor plan. It's really a block plan showing workstations and office locations. One of the first steps we would encourage is really understanding how your teams are allocated throughout your floor plan, especially after this phased re-entry. Due to physical distancing, they may be dispersed differently across your floor plate. And it's important to understand the activities and sort of occupancy and utilization of these different departments and roles. And understanding where they're located on your floor plate is a good insight into how your space could be used better or opportunities for improvement. So one of the first steps, again, that we would start with is just clearly understanding how are we allocating our teams throughout our floor plate. The next thing to look at is really your occupancy. What you're seeing here is a portion of a floor plan that was observed over multiple intervals, and we're looking at different types of occupancy. You might be asking yourself, what do you mean by different types of occupancy? So all of these colors represented on the plan are showing whether an individual was occupied and present in their work environment, whether they were occupied, not currently present, which basically means that it's evident that they are in this building or on campus, on site. Sometimes we refer to this as the hot coffee desk or signs of life. This is a critical element that I like to measure because it informs us of the percentage of people that are using their assigned workspace more as a locker or just a touchdown dropping off point. And that can start to uncover and identify areas of opportunity within the floor plate to use square footage differently. The other thing we like to measure is utilization. So when our individuals and our teams are dispersed throughout our floor plates, what activities are they actually engaged in, and how well is that environment supporting what they're doing? What I've just run through is really more so of a manual or in-person observation that can be quite cumbersome. But in recent years, there has been such advancement in technology. And what I'm showing you on the screen is an example of Herman Miller's live platform. And this basically measures utilization every single day throughout your spaces. So the graph on the right is showing our peak utilization over the course of 6 months. And so this is an interesting and less invasive and easy way to gather data around your floor plate. And as we move into the future, I believe that these types of technological tools will become much more accessible and truly aid in our ability to make informed decisions regarding our real estate. You can see this is a floor plan of our actual downtown San Diego showroom. And our first level is predominantly populated with our mobile free address staff. At least they were free address or unassigned prior to COVID-19. That will be changing as we re-enter. But if I were looking at this just from a utilization perspective, it is very clear that the workstations on the first floor, especially this cluster here, are greatly underutilized. Now, if I were going to make decisions about my real estate, this would be compelling and eye-opening information. For us as a furniture dealership and showroom, we optimize our square footage by showing as many working applications as possible on our floor plate. So it makes sense for us to maintain this type of square footage. But you can see on our second floor that these rectangles and boxes represent groupings of workstations much more utilized, and that has to do with the work modes and the work styles of the individuals that are placed on that floor. So this is just a peek into how you can evaluate your space and your usage using technological tools to help you as you move forward in your future decisions. The other thing to think about, and Jenny's going to help me out with this slide as well, is our work modes. What are we engaged in the office? What we're showing here are the basic work modes that are found in almost every organization. So the collaboration, this can occur, at the desk. 80% of the time it does occur at the desk. But why is that? Is it because there's nowhere else for that to occur within the office? If we think about focus and individual work and our recent working from home experience, how will that change? How will we disperse those individuals that work from home and those in the office, and how does that impact our overall real estate decisions? Then we have our learning and our socializing environments. I read something recently and it was access is the new ownership. So I think that coming back into the office and looking at the percentages of people that are actually there and the types of spaces that we need to interact with and engage with, we will start to measure how often are we actually using that space, and should I commit to owning that amount of real estate, or is this something that I could have a membership to? It's almost training or conference rooms on demand. So just start thinking about how often you're using things and what you're actually doing there. And that lends itself to these 6 questions. So who, what, when, where, and how. Probably reminds us back to grammar school, but I like to ask those questions when I'm thinking about these different modes of work. And it really starts to feed into learning about gaps in our real estate, in our spaces, and opportunities for improvement to increase our productivity and connection within the environment. Jenny, do you have any? There you go.
Land on this line for a while. We've already seen progress around the shared space, the dare I say it, the WeWorks type space, where it's workspace on demand, and opening up that question to just say, what does that reimagined workplace look like for you? And we'll talk a little bit later about landmarks of a modern workplace. But the idea around thinking more strategically about your organization's actual committed, obligated footprint versus all-inclusive, I must accommodate every activity, I must accommodate every need in my own workspace, or leaning into these other areas. Is that smarter? And going into a future real estate strategy, is it smarter for me to carry a budget and an expense line item for rental versus owning and managing that space and potentially operating it? So we've already seen some of those things take place where landlords and developers are building in amenity spaces that multi-tenant environments can use, leaning into the WeWorks environment. So thinking about those pieces as you start to look at your real estate strategy and to be creative and say, what if? Now, what you're seeing on the screen here are the recognized modes of work that every person participates in. These are observed, documented, understood, and very well established across the industry and across how we work. So let's imagine that we say that focused work now takes place in the home, and that yes, we recognize that there are people that do need to be on site within the housed physical workplace environment. But what if we opened up the idea that true individual focused work happens at home and the organization is actually no longer paying for that real estate? What we also conversely are recognizing is that the workplace is starting to feel more like a place to connect and collaborate and socialize. And if those are the pieces that you want to draw people together in, how do you transition your workplace or think about your workplace differently that way? These are all ideas and thoughts around what does the future real workplace start to look like? And then learning, we've long seen academies across elementary school. This is dominant. And we've seen online training courses, all higher education, certification programs for working professionals that can acquire knowledge in a virtual environment. We'll never want to take away the aspect of learning from peers and mentoring and how to do that, because that's very much part of this discussion. But just raising it up and saying, let's think about the future of the workplace in a different capacity, and what could we do with that?
I think that a lot of the points you just made really lend itself to the landmarks of the modern workplace. And you all may recognize this slide from our last conversation when we were talking about working from home. But understanding that idea of maybe focused work in the future does happen predominantly at home for certain work styles or work modes. And then we have the in-between. That could be shared amenities within the built form. It could be coffee shops, off-site customer visits, and then what is taking place within the actual real estate that you commit to in your portfolio. And how diverse are the settings within that real estate, and what work modes do they support? So having that great understanding of who's in your office, where they're allocated, how they're occupying that space, and where they are in terms of these landmarks is great information and data to help you sort of find your future formula. And we've kind of called our method of looking at these factors finding the future. As long as we've been doing this, when we're working with our clients, the future is always unknown, and the goal is to create an environment that is sustainable for a long period of time and that will support change as we move forward. So we've always believed in evidence-based design. I think Jenny mentioned that earlier, and we have been informed and educated by our manufacturing partner, Herman Miller, whose core values are in innovation and human-centered evidence-based design. So we've learned a lot over the years of, their decades. I mean, they're pioneers when it comes to that. And that has informed really how we approach looking at furniture planning and our clients and their facilities and what that commitment is. So we feel that this formula really looks at, again, where are we allocating people within our space? How occupied are we? How is this being used? The modes of work that we are most commonly engaged in, the diverse work styles that we have, and how those work styles are distributed across these landmarks of the modern workplace. So once we kind of have a great understanding of those things, that can help us make informed decisions and identify where we could be leaner, more sustainable, and even more productive and connected. So that's really in as we embark on this uncertain future and we start to re-enter and phase back into the workplace, these are the factors that we believe should be top of mind after the dust settles and we've had some time to come back. We think that looking here will help guide you to what the future may hold.
Can I just add on to that these questions around how much space I need, how long do I need it to last, what environment is right for me, where should I be, these are not new questions. Every organization that has had the opportunity to build up their workforce, expand their portfolio, or renovate, have all asked the questions: how do I use my budget, my resources wisely? And so what we're really saying here is that now, moving into this unprecedented event, we have added components and new things to consider. And those also just become part of this equation. But where you can find the insights in your own organization and in your own evidence of what's happening within your own environment, gathering that information and leaning into your organization, its leaders, the thought leaders within, and also the industry benchmarking to a certain degree, is really going to help you make informed decisions with confidence over time and do the right thing for your organization. And so that's really what this is talking about here.
Really quick, before we advance to questions, I want to just pinpoint that you said these are not new questions.
Yeah.
They're not. But the way in which we gather this information and answer these questions with advancements in technology that are here and progressing rapidly, that will change our ability to gather this information and this data. It will become much more accessible than it ever has been before. And I think that is what will accelerate us into this future workplace that we're on our way to.
Right, so now I think we're taking a quick Q&A break. And I'm aware that I had a couple network issues, so I might have sounded like a robot on one or two of my comments. So apologies for that. So hopefully we'll have nothing like that in the second half.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny. And seeing some of the amazing comments coming through the chat box. Thank you all so much for your feedback, your comments, your questions. We have time to take about 2 questions right now. So I'm going to start with a question I saw from Richard. He asks, some companies have moved to an agile working approach, working in pods with 5 to 7 people in a shared space. How do you see this changing as a result of the coronavirus?
I love the question because there's been a lot of conflicting conversation around, if I worked agilely and there's hoteling and I never had an assigned desk, would it be better if now I had an assigned desk because I can control the cleanliness of it, or I can control that particular workplace? And then the flip side of that is, well, it's better for me to be hoteling because the organization can keep it clean and ensure that it's sanitized and ready for the next occupant, and there's less clutter or stuff or personal belongings in the workplace. So I feel that there's definitely a conflict around what's right for the organization or to maintain a sanitized and healthy physical environment. In light of organizations who have built teams and built pods for groups to work, I definitely think and know and have experienced with a few clients that for the immediate future, we will be asking those to be at kind of this half capacity level, and splitting time between teams being distributed at home and in the office. They might still have that anchor identity of that's their pod or that's their work area, but they're still going to be splitting time. And I think we're going to see that for a while. I don't know if in the future it will mean that that pod arrangement goes away, or if the pod arrangement just gets larger. Right?
I think that's a key point right there is spacing and orientation. I agree with everything that Jenny said in terms of the controversy and the question around the hoteling, the free address, and the assigned. As she mentioned earlier, there's been studies, and assigned desks sometimes are dirtier than toilets because they never get cleaned. So the hoteling with the proper protocols, clean desk policies, and regular maintenance may be something that we return to, not sure. But looking at group bullpens or pods where it's important for those teams to have that crosstalk and that visual connection throughout the day, I think it is about spacing, and it's about still creating that 6-foot distance within that pod. We may have fewer workstations on our floor plate, and that will be handled with staggering of shifts and percentages of people that work from home. But for that need for collaboration, I still think that we can work in somewhat close proximity to each other for the benefits of collaboration.
Awesome. I saw a question come in from Joel. I think you guys kind of just touched on it, but he's asking what happens at the C-level spaces, like boardrooms, private offices, travel paths, and I think we kind of covered that. I think we're going to go into it a little bit, but just wanted to throw it out there.
Mm-hmm. Just like any other space, executive areas will need to comply and align with the organization's direction. And my mind actually immediately goes more to change management and change readiness and communicating at all levels and aligning at all levels around behaviors and etiquettes that are expected in the physical workplace environment. If you don't have your leadership promoting it and aligning around it, then your staff will not feel that it's relevant to them as well. But to the physical question at hand, boardrooms themselves, again, the spacing for a time being around the physical distancing. Maybe you're pulling out chairs immediately. But in the future, in my experience in particular, many board members are actually coming from other areas of the country or are videoing in. So I would start to expect more videoing conferencing. And I will even go so far as to say, when I get to my technology slide a little bit later, a hologram. So I have been part of discussions exploring how do you hologram certain people in, and is that technology relevant across the entire organization, or is it just suited for certain meeting types or certain groups of people? Very interesting question to think about in the future.
I think that this idea of a mixed ratio of virtual and physical attendees in those large boardrooms, I think initially we'll try to avoid the 20-30 person meeting in those boardrooms, and there will be a combination of virtual attendees and physical attendees, and our technology and displays and the ability to really connect and feel like everyone is in the room with each other. I think that will just advance and become much more seamless in the future.
Love it.
Thank you guys. And I see we have time for just like one more question. It'll kind of segue us into the second half. Kelly was asking your thoughts on co-working spaces. Is this something that's completely done or changing physical spacing and protocols? And a second part of that would just be, how will this affect kind of everything we've been working up until 2020, the open office? So that's my question.
Yeah, there's a lot of, that is a great segue into the futuristic part of our webinar where we're going into the unknown. I do believe, based on kind of some of my earlier comments around reimagining the landmarks of the workplace, that blended spaces, a WeWorks type space or a co-working type space, are still going to be relevant. I think the interesting thing will be you as a person going into those spaces that you might not be familiar with and having to understand how to properly conduct yourself in those spaces. Making sure that that's known is going to be really crucial towards making those spaces remain viable. There's a lot of discussion around open office and the value of open versus, everyone having an enclosed space. I think Meagan kind of covered that in terms of cleanliness and ability to manage. I do think that we are going to see a shift in individuals' personal identification with their workspace, shifting back into the home. And organizations are going to need to impress upon the fact that the workplace needs to be clean and able to be maintained quickly and efficiently. And that should actually lend itself to cutting down on the clutter. And Meagan's going to go into some of those things when we get to kind of the healthcare aspect. So without further ado, let's move into the future, the sci-fi, the great unknown. Meagan and I and the partners and the peers that we work with, we are constantly in philosophical discussions around these things and saying how historically has design approached a problem, how has design sought to solve a concern or a need, and those things still prevail. So we're going to talk about the guiding principles that we feel are going to be core to going into the future workplace, the optimal long-term future workplace, not the 6 months from now workplace. And then the elements of healthcare that are coming to the forefront, and then the advancement in technology. So that's kind of this next piece. So if you could, excuse me, there appears to be a fly that wants to interrupt my train of thought. Okay, so we could move into guiding principles. Again, design, workplace strategists, industry leaders with deep expertise and deep knowledge of seeking to solve problems and kind of looking at these problems have long built guiding principles and key components that guide us to a future solution. So in thinking about those and trying to look towards the future, we really feel strongly that the future workplace environment needs to bridge into these strategies. And you'll remember we started this webinar by talking about all the Band-Aid forced solutions that the workplace is going to feel very abrupt and might be sort of frustrating and caught off guard and oh, am I supposed to go here and do I go there? And a lot of uncertainty based on augmented signage or things that are like coming at you to make sure that we start to transition behaviors. What we're talking about now is the exact opposite of that, and feeling very fluid and comfortable and feeling like when we walk into a workplace or into a space that it feels welcoming and holistic, and that there's these spatial cues that guide behavior very subtly, so it feels very intuitive to you. So Meagan, I don't want to steal your thunder because this is such a great you speak so eloquently about this.
Well, I think the point you made about the Band-Aids, if you will, that we're bringing into our spaces, and not to knock on that at all. I mean, it's what's necessary right now. I think what we've learned about our workplaces is that they weren't equipped to handle this type of virus and this type of needed distancing. And we've learned so much from that in what we've had to bring into our spaces just to get our people back together. So I think moving forward, we're not going to forget this experience. And if we have the chance to do a huge retrofit or start from scratch with a building, these are the guiding principles that I think will be leading so much of the design decisions. And it's less of reacting to the signage or the arrows or the things on the wall stopping you from what you would naturally do, right? We're trying to mold the behaviors of our people as they come back into the office to prevent the spread of a virus, and we're not used to behaving that way. So what if these cues and this information and this suggested behavior just felt much more natural and holistic and integrated within the space? And if it is holistic and integrated, the built environment becomes much more intuitive and more natural for us to navigate through that space. And most importantly, we have to ensure safety and health, and our employees have to see that. They have to understand that that is taking place. There are measures put in place in this built environment that make me feel safe and they make me feel healthy. And that lends itself to wellness, or rather well-being, because wellness refers to physical health, but well-being is that optimal condition that's characterized by happiness, health, and prosperity. So this is a tall order, right? I mean, to think of a built environment that really embodies these principles, to me, is a futuristic concept. But it's something that I think healthcare has been striving for many years. They've been looking at how can this sterile environment become a place of well-being and a place of healing. And so I think that the more that we've talked about this and thought about this and the future workplace and what will become of it, while we don't believe that it's going to become this, sterile, cold, surgical environment, we do believe that the healthcare industry and the design from healthcare and what they've learned can serve as a mentor for the future workplace. There are so many elements that they've studied and researched and incorporated that feel like they're coming to the surface in the things that we're starting to talk about and how we're going to look at the design of workplace. So one of those things, and it's been even in the commercial world in the last couple of years, is that idea of biophilia and bringing in nature. There is tons of research around how we as humans respond to nature, how it increases our concentration, eases our mood, just improves our overall experience. I think that color will play a significant part in our spaces moving forward. That physical security, wayfinding will be, I think, a huge aspect of future workplace designs. In hospitals, they're very strategic about how individuals, how this population travels through that space, and the access they have to certain areas within the facility. They're able to contain outbreaks within hospitals through their circulation paths and different technology. I think that's something that we'll lean into, and we're already starting to talk about how are we circulating, and maybe these should be one-way boulevards, or how, if we could design something from scratch, how would we think about that circulation? So that's something that I think will adopt adaptability, adapt to change. If anything, we've learned that our spaces must be more flexible and adaptable to respond to different things that happen in our world. Minimizing infection is huge. So leaning into a lot of the technology and the materials used in healthcare, I think they might start to find their way into the workplace. Smart materials, self-cleaning, antimicrobial, and also this idea of well-being. Again, this has been a topic in the workplace for quite some time, and with all the research done in healthcare, they've really learned that people heal faster when they have this access to nature, when they understand the space they're in, when they can be connected and social with their loved ones, when their loved ones are comfortable in that space. So that definitely will lend itself to that user's or that worker experience. And then just increased hand washing, sanitation, improved HVAC and ventilation systems, and most recently, operable windows, bringing in more of that outdoor air so that we're cutting down on how much is recirculating in the space. So those are just some elements of healthcare design that I think will teach us and inform some of our workplace applications in the future. And I just wanted to take a moment and look at some of these pictures of healthcare facilities. I mean, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But when I just look at this environment up on the left, you see a very stark space. I mean, we have homogeneous flooring with zero seams. The furniture is spaced pretty far apart. There's not a whole lot going on, but this gigantic view to nature, this outside sort of coming in, just even in that picture view, completely changes your experience in what otherwise would be a very sterile environment. So just thinking about how that light and that nature can change this very clean space and make it feel human and completely change the experience. Those are things that I think that we can learn. And then if you look at this space down in the lower portion of the screen, we have very simple furnishings that are probably covered in antimicrobial fabrics that are easily bleach cleanable. We don't have pillows and decorative items on top of tables or magazines or books. But the space still feels very tactile and very human. And we can attribute that to, again, the views from outside, the natural light pouring in, and then even these large installations of artwork that emulate nature. These are ways that you can keep an environment very clean and very easy to maintain, but still have this enhanced user experience. So something that we've learned is that we are stimulated and made more happy in nature, which is why it started to make its place in healthcare and the workplace. And part of that is that in nature, we have diversity. We have difference in color and texture. There's so many things that stimulate our senses. And we can do that. We can have the best of both worlds, you know, the shelter that protects us from nature and all of the beautiful things that stimulate the senses. And the wonderful thing about that in these types of environments, once you layer in technology, is that this can be a stimulated, great experience in a touchless environment. So it's all visual. And you can see here on the right, this is a great example of how interior architecture is borrowing elements of nature, creating diversity in the space, but we still have open, expansive environments. So I know that's a lot of sort of talk about design, but I think that as we move into the future workplace, thinking about those interior architectural elements is what will make the experience more human, while possibly the furnishings and the distance between vignettes or zones will be greater. Another thing to quickly point out is if you look at the lower portion here, we're looking at these integrated screens, these partitions, there's sinks in the circulation. And yes, this is a healthcare environment. But if we want these social cues and we want this integrated holistic space to inform us and remind us of when we need to clean or wash up, integrating aspects of that can help you be successful in doing that. If you think about a well-planned hospital or exam room, the sink is right next to the door. It's a constant reminder to the doctor or the nurse or whoever's coming in, wash your hands. So just some things to point out that I think we can learn from healthcare design and begin to apply to our workplaces, and that in combination with advancement in technology, I think that will really inform our future. So with that, I will turn this over to Jenny, and she can talk about the sci-fi aspect of what is to come.
Thank you. So we're going to go from design and the tactile environment and the way a space still feels holistic and well for an employee. And now we're going to transfer that thought into technology and how our interactions with technology and embedded in the workplace of the future might also contribute to that feeling of a holistic and intuitive workplace. So everything that you see on the screen right now exists today. We're very much participating with technology in all aspects of our life in their various forms. But I think what we're going to see in the future is an acceleration of and enhancement in this technology that will really become more of a standard practice in workplace rather than kind of a discretionary item. So let's talk a little bit about the the day-to-day experience that you have right now to kind of set the tone. In the morning, you might wake up and Alexa or Google might tell you what time it is and might tell you the weather and when your first meeting is, and might even tell you what the traffic pattern is. And that might be really glorious news right now to hear that you only have a 10-minute drive to the office. But those things are already connecting across multiple information sources to provide you information. And then you might get out of bed and have a cup of coffee and pick up your smartphone, and facial recognition is unlocking it for you and making it easy and touchless for you to interact with that device. So those things are already happening for us today. And if we start to translate some of that into the physical workplace, you can see what's possible and you can see where we might be going. Just in occupancy sensors alone, we already know and are familiar and comfortable with walking into a workplace and a door opening for us, or an airport or a grocery store, walking in and the lights turning on. But in the future, occupancy sensors could also start to play into, will your web meeting automatically turn on? Will the AV already know that your meeting is scheduled and integrate and already turn on for you, so that it's a touchless and seamless experience when you walk into that physical workplace environment? What about utilization? So when I think of occupancy, I automatically go to that who's where, when are they there, what are the peak periods that I have people in those spaces, and how can I use that information to get an optimal layout that supports the organization. So imagine translating that much further to give insight into your future workplace environments. Occupancy sensors and that technology can also lend itself towards employees having more access to it. So for a long time now, occupancy sensors have been really driven around facilities managers and real estate and workplace strategists looking at that data to form decisions around the workplace environment. But what if the occupancy sensor technology starts to be used for employees to work, and whether or where the last workplace environment that's done for people right now? There's so many ways that this technology can move forward that we're expecting to see. I see that I had a we are going to go a few minutes over, probably because we love the topic. So we hope you can stay and join us. If you have any questions, again, we will make sure that we address those for you. Touchless, I'm going to skip over dynamic floor plans because Meagan talked about that in terms of the intuitive wayfinding in hospitals. And I think that we're going to really start to see that in terms of workplace and efficient flows within the workplace. And then really touchless technology. Think about your own personal device and how powerful that can be coming into a workplace environment. What if you're able to access a locked room, an interactive display, an elevator, a workstation to raise or lower your sit-stand functionality? All those things can start to be done from your personal device and make it really seamless and touchless across the different technologies that are available. And then really what this is doing is building a smarter system where all of these pieces are coming together for a communication, for management, for facilities managers to manage facilities and optimize and efficiently, but also for employees, service providers, and leaders to interact in the workplace with the best possible communication and information in the moment. And then when you combine all that and you look at the power of the data and the power of the information that's available, and you can start to collect that information over time and use benchmarking platforms and trend analysis over time, you have a really powerful set of tools that can help shape the future workplace and what you need in the future. And that's really where I feel advanced technology is taking us going forward. And then below the line, I'm not an expert in any of these things, although I use the Internet of Things on a day-to-day basis. But all of these things exist, and I know and firmly believe and have seen how those that are experts in this are looking at the future and saying, what if, what if, what if? And how will these things become more commonplace in our workplace? Well, before we kind of never thought touchless or sensor technology would be in our workplace, but now it is. I think these things kind of in the lower half are going to start to become more of a reality in the future. And this is not next week. This might not even be next year, but we know how fast tech turns. And I think that we're going to start to see ideas and solutions that are technology driven come into our workplace over the next 3 to 5 years. So Meagan, could you skip to slide 24 in the interest of time? In the deck, when we do send out the deck, there is a statement that really just kind of resonates and wraps that up. But in the interest of time, we're just going to skip over that and really go from the what if, the future, what does the future hold? And really land back on what do we know? What do we know? So what is certain? And let's anchor ourselves to that with some thoughts around where we're headed in the future. Health and safety first, employee well-being. Those things are primary and central to bringing people back into the workplace and for employees to feel as though that they can trust and have confidence in the physical environment. Visual cues, signage, wayfinding, that over time is going to turn digital, but is going to be necessary to inform in the moment and give you insight into the performance of the workplace and the environments that you inhabit. Much like an airport, when you go in and you get a sense of where you're headed and where you're going and where the flights are, having that constant flow of information and where to find it very quickly and efficiently is going to build the confidence that everyone needs to go back into a modern day workplace. And then we know that all of our facilities in particular will need to be more adaptable and flexible, not only in the infrastructure, but also in the furniture solutions and the ability to change and shift as needs change and shift over time. And that's really one way to get an optimal use of your footprint over time. And then we know less density, we talked about that. And then holistically, the expanded view of the office. We are recognizing, we're all from home right now, we're recognizing that the office is a viable strategy as part of a real estate solution. So we're going to continue to see themes around that emerge, and we'll see which companies do it best, and the ones that are pushing to be the thought leaders and the innovators in that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what holds for that. But no matter what, we know that the office has a place. And Meagan, if you could just flip to the last slide and share with us your thoughts on the physical workplace.
Sure. I couldn't agree more with this statement that the workplace remains a place of connection and purpose that does tie us all together as individuals. And while the future is uncertain, Jenny, the things that you just listed as the certainty of our future is key. And this is an exciting and innovative time. Granted, it came out of a horrible event, but I think that we have to start to look towards our future and coming together through a positive lens and embrace the innovation and the technology and the things that we can learn from other industries to bring everyone back together and do it in a way that makes us feel safe and connected. And with that, I think that we're done with our content, but I'd like to open it up back to Brittany for some questions.
Yes, definitely. Thank you guys so much. This was super insightful, and I really, really enjoyed today's presentation. We had a couple of questions pop up. Actually, I'm going to ask a personal questions, but we're starting to see a lot of things like floor decals and partitions and social distancing signage and people shields and sanitation stations. Do you think things like this will become the norm in the future workspace in terms of space planning? And do you think we'll start seeing more like healthcare textiles being used and microbial surfaces that are easy to clean?
I definitely, well, my hope is that our buildings in the future will be able to kind of become more rigid when they need to be and loosen when they don't need to be. So ideas of social distancing and, signage and things like that would be more integrated into the actual built form and architecture. So less of an applied afterthought and more of something that can come into play when it's necessary. And again, that would be informed through a lot of what the healthcare design has done. So I think a combination of these buildings that are able to adapt and flex depending on the crisis or the situation, I think that will be more greatly developed in the future. And then yes, smarter materials, antimicrobial, I do think that they will find their way into the office, which is a contrast from what we have been practicing in recent years in our workplaces. We were bringing in more of that residential or hospitality feel, so it felt less corporate. And so what that meant is softer, more plush fabrics and things like pillows and more accessories that felt like something that you might find in your home or residential style light fixtures. So I think that we still want to continue that warmth and that inviting humanistic feeling, but we'll have to do it in different ways through more so biophilia and materials in areas that we're not necessarily touching and interacting with.
I'd add on to that and say that those that are developing and thinking about materiality and performance materials are going to seek to say, how can I create a material that's highly cleanable, that will not absorb or that will kill whatever virus or germ might be around, but still have a look and feel that is comforting to others. So what we have right now will not be all that we'll have in the future.
Right.
Awesome. And on that biophilia, I did have a biophilic question come through. Janice asked if you think you'll start seeing more plans on casters or mobile living walls or moss walls being used to reimagine workspaces.
Love that question. Yes, let's do it.
I think so. I think that we started, products are coming to mind that are actually already doing that. And that is a great sort of natural way to divide space and bring that biophilia in at that kind of like human level. I think that we'll have to be careful about the types of materials or the types of, handles and things like that, how we move it. Again, we want to provide the least amount of opportunity for viruses to sort of live and exchange. So the materiality of that would have to be considered and thought through. But yeah, I definitely see more elements of plants coming in to use as separation.
Awesome. And then the last question is from Candace. It's a lengthy question, but she asks, with regard to looking at employee demographics, do you anticipate more extreme measures in certain areas based on level of fear compared to some areas where the majority of the population may be eager to return to life as it was? Second part, how would you suggest gathering this data to determine what is best for each organization? And how do you prevent alienating employees if they're not on board with proposed changes to the office plan, regardless of whether they believe it was too much or not enough?
So that whole question is entirely couched under the umbrella of change management and a communication strategy. And we know that everyone adapts to change differently. We know that everyone has had passed that initial whoop to return home very abruptly. Once in the home environment, the response to working from home has been drastically different. People have been impacted by the virus, and their response to going back into the physical workplace or even the grocery store might be extremely scary for them or raise feelings of fear. And so an organization's responsibility at the highest level is to really demonstrate through a suite of things. It's not just one thing, but a suite of things. And we do talk about that in webinar one, of safety and confidence and trust to the employee. It is not ever appropriate to isolate a person or their response to a return to work plan, and to kind of segregate or call out or differentiate groups of people. That has to be done in partnership with the leader and the human resources group and that individual to what makes to make a solution for that person. So there's definitely HR components that play into that, but overall the organization needs to demonstrate the safety of returning to work and show how the workplace is comfortable. We also talked about very early in the webinar series that for a while, it will be up to the individual employee when they feel confident in returning to the workplace. And that's not a sustainable model, but for a time, and I would postulate that that's through the remainder of this year, that it will be up to the employee that says, I feel safe one day a week. I feel safe for half a day. I don't want to return until all public transportation and all life as we know it is back to normal, right? So it's going to vary, and I think we're going to experience some variance, and organizations are going to be comfortable with that, but only to a certain point. And after that, it's up to the organization to decide with that individual employee. I hope I answered most of that question.
That was a very comprehensive answer, Jenny, and I don't think I could add anything other than if there's a way to provide choice in the work environment for certain, for individuals, so that they could almost select the space within the office where they felt the safest, that might help with this idea of isolation and alienation.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's very true.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to end the questions there. You guys did a great job at answering all of the questions that we had, and just an amazing job on these webinars. This was our third and final webinar in the Workplace for Breakfast series, but we are hoping to continue doing these webinars in the future. So hopefully this isn't the last that you're seeing of Workplace for Breakfast. If you have any feedback on how these webinars have been, or things you've learned, or things you want to learn more of, please send an email to marketing@gmbi.net, or if you have personal connections with anyone at GM, you can email them as well. Jenny and Megan, I don't know if you guys have talked about this, but do you know if we'll be sending out any kind of like survey or anything for people to fill out asking for feedback on this? Do you know?
Yes, we have talked about sending out a survey about just gaining feedback on this experience, and then also to give us ideas or thoughts on future topics. Again, there isn't necessarily a webinar that's planned at the moment, but we would love to continue conversations and continue this dialogue and reaching out to all of you. This has been a great experience for us, and I sincerely thank you all for joining throughout this time. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we will get some great feedback, and our next webinars will be improved or even better, and dealing with topics that you're all hungry for more information.
And again, we have for also a downloadable PDF of the PowerPoint. And if anyone needs help with anything regarding, your workspace or planning for the future, anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help you all.